Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes as people file in here. Okay, it looks like most of our panelists are now joining us.
Hi, Vivek.
Hello, hi Rachel. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning there, right?
Good morning. Yeah, it's very early here.
My another panelist, Andrea, we just finished another session for another meeting, so they are joining late. So yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
So our team for 9 p.m. That one, we are all here. Dura is already here. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, well, hello everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to part 2 of the 2022 edition of the Orang Asli seminar series. For those of you who are just joining us today, the Orang Asli are the indigenous peoples of Peninsular Malaysia, and the seminar series is about their culture and history, as well as the challenges they face in a rapidly changing world. My name is Vivek Venkatraman, and I'm one of the hosts of the series. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Calgary in Canada. This event is being hosted by Keene State College in New Hampshire, which also holds the Orang Asli archive. And my co-organizers have been Rodney Obian and Celia Rubinowitz, who will now say a few words of welcome. Welcome, Celia.
Thanks, Vivek. Good morning and good evening, wherever you are. As Vivek said, my name is Dr. Celia Rubinowitz. I am the Assistant Vice President for Academic Engagement and the Director of Mason Library here at Keene State College. On behalf of Mason Library and Keene State College, we welcome you back to this final day of our second International Orang Asli Symposium. We're so pleased to be able to host the symposium again and hope it will be one of what are more to come in the future. The talks so far have really been wonderful, and it's also been really exciting to see participants making new connections, which we hope will continue for you. I want to express my gratitude and my personal admiration for both Rodney and Vivek, who have worked really, really hard to put all of this together with the technical support of Misty Kennedy here on our campus. And finally, I want to say what a privilege it is for us to have the honor and responsibility of stewardship for our Orang Asli archive here at Mason Library. And we extend an invitation and would love to see any of you here if you're ever able to visit. I'm looking forward to today's talks, so once again, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so today's theme is Orang Asli health, and this features 9 talks by leading experts on these issues. Just a few basic housekeeping items to make sure that things run smoothly. The audience right now is muted, but you can feel free to use the chat at any time. And in fact, it would be great, as we did last week, if you could write your name and a brief bio in the chat so that we can get to know each other. Each talk is 15 minutes, and that includes time for questions. So presenters have been asked to keep their presentations to 10 to 12 minutes so we can have time for a little bit of questioning. We do ask everyone to respect this timeline, and we may need to step in if people go over. For audience members, if you want to ask a question, you can type it in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom, and one of us will be monitoring the chat for questions and compiling these, and we can come back to them. If you're called on to ask a question, you can unmute yourself at that time. And at the end of the talks today, we're going to keep the Zoom room open for perhaps an hour or so in case people want to keep on discussing. Now, because of this unique crowd that we have here, I just wanted to use this opportunity real quick to describe a collaborative project that me and my colleagues are working on. Just a brief note about this. I would urge you to check out our website, orangoslihealth.org. This is the website for the Orang Asli Health and Lifeways Project, which is a consortium of researchers in the biological and social sciences with a current research focus on the rise of chronic non-infectious diseases among the Orang Asli due to rapidly changing environments. And what we do is we engage Orang Asli communities in systematic and longitudinal monitoring of health, along with anthropological fieldwork, looking at behavior, social factors, and lifestyle attributes that contribute to disease risk. This is a project currently funded by the National Science Foundation. And the reason I bring this up here is to note that we will actually be hiring 2 positions. So we'll be asking for help from some of you to advertise these positions. Maybe you know some people that would be good. In particular, we'll be hiring a field manager to help coordinate logistics of this project, as well as a lab manager to coordinate aspects of the lab work with this. But more generally, this is a new project, and we look forward to developing collaborations and relationships with many of you through that. Okay, so I will stop sharing here. Thank you for your time on that. And with that, I will introduce our first speaker, Muhammad Sayuti Hassan from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, talking about the legal framework of the rights to health among Orang Asli. Are you able to share your screen? Let's see. Ronnie, do we have Mohammed here in the presenters?
Hello, yes.
Oh, hello, welcome. Are you able to share your screen?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and you can start.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, if you can just make it, yeah, perfect, there we go.
Right. Thank you, Vivek, Mr. Moderator tonight. First of all, thank you very much, the organizer, for this opportunity. My name is Muhammad Sayuti bin Hassan. Together with me, Nawal Muhammad Amin. We are from Faculty of Law, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, today our topic for our presentations is the legal framework on the rights to health of Orang Asli. This is the outline for our presentation. Basically, we will cover definition, identification, or classification, the concept of health of Orang Asli, a bit history of Orang Asli health, issues and challenges, and the crux of our presentation will be legal framework, which covering international law, federal constitution, Aboriginal Peoples Act 1954, brief comparative studies, suggestion for improvements, and conclusion. This is definitions of Orang Asli, which can be derived from Federal Constitution, Article 160, Clause 1. As well as we also can refer to Section 3, Clause 1, the Orang Asli Act 1954. I don't plan to read all, but you can see from the slide. The classifications of Orang Asli consists of 3 main groups, and we have 18 sub-ethnic. And the terms Orang Asli derive from the Arabic words Asali, which means origin and native, and Orang Asli in Malaysia represent 0.5 of the total populations. So this is basically the groups of Orang Asli in Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, this is quite important. The Orang Asli's concept of health, the natural environment and affect the social culture and belief related to the concept of health in this community, which is Orang Asli, as a neutral behavior that adapts to the surrounding environment. And usually Orang Asli utilize herbs as a traditional treatment to treat health problems, which can cover their ritual and dietary context as well. The Orang Asli hold on the tradition of medical ritual passed down from generation to next generation. The ritual basically is not only performed to cure the pain or illness, but it also like a routine to expel evil elements that start from the moment of birth to the moment of death among Orang Asli. A little bit of history of Orang Asli. Basically, Orang Asli were first exposed to science-based modern medicine to treat disease during the emergency period from 1948 to 1960. And the situation of health quite critical, especially when the Orang Asli community was moved to the resettlement area, which was closely guarded and fenced off. This is initially can be considered as a nightmare to the Orang Asli because it leads to the death of 7,000 Orang Asli due to malnutrition, depression, disease, and uninspiring atmosphere of the camp. And then as a development, the administrator of Orang Asli during that time built forest forts to introduce to Orang Asli about the basic concept of basic facilities and modern health services. And then next development, Gombak Hospital was built. And during under the supervisions of Dr. Bolton, the health status of the Orang Asli can be considered as improved compared to the earlier one. However, a bit later, in 1980s, there were several complaints were made stating that the health services of Orang Asli were no longer sufficient. So this is the progress or the developments of the administrations of the Orang Asli. You can see the down below where Orang Asli Acts was introduced in 1974. Which they started with the original tribes of Perak or enactment number 3, 1939. And then we can see here the administrations of the Orang Asli with regard to health. And the final box down below, circular number 4 in 2012 states that in the context of Orang Asli health and medical services, it was officially taken over by the Malaysian Ministry of Health, which the medical services and health of Orang Asli until now were taken care by the Ministry of Health, which previously under the Jakowa. Okay, these are among the issues. The list is not exhaustive, but these are among the issues and challenges faced by the Orang Asli with regards to health. Number 1 is poverty. We all know that more than 50% of Orang Asli are categorized as poor, and 33% as hardcore poor compared to 0.5%, 0.7% national. And then high mortality among infant and children. This is previous or quite old statistic, 2008. And non-recognitions of land right I will explain further how non-recognition of land right can affect the health of orang asli later. And then we also, one of the issue is all disease faced by the orang asli, such as malaria, bronchitis, tooth decay, and the existence of intestinal worms. All right, and then another issues and challenges is orang asli health data is not specified. Okay, this is the next slides is on legal framework, which I explained earlier. We start with international law standards on the rights to health of indigenous people. When we talk about right to health, we should refer to the WHO Constitution 1948, which states health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That means it includes physical, mental health, social well-being, and so on. And then later, ICESCR adopt this definition under Article 12 with addition the highest level of physical and mental health that can be achieved. This definition by WHO and ICESCR was adopted in Article 24, Clause 2 of the UNDRIP, which, for your information, UNDRIP is a universal minimum standards for survival, dignity, and well-being of indigenous peoples, which Malaysia is one of the states who vote for UNDRIP. UNDRIP also elaborates existing standards of human being and fundamental freedoms specific and dedicated to the orang asli, including the health right. Okay, these are among the provision specifically provide on the rights to health. For example, Article 21 pertaining to retraining housing, sanitation, health, and social security. Article 21, Clause 2, particular attention shall be paid to the right and special need of indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disability. Article 23, the underlying part, right to be actively involved in developing and determining health, housing, and other economic and social programs. And quite important under Article 24, the underlined part, right, indigenous people have the right to their traditional medicine and to maintain their health practices. Clause 2, indigenous individual have an equal right to enjoyment of the highest attainable standards of physical and mental health. We can see from here that this is the standard that all states in the world should treat indigenous people with this kind of rights. All right, in the local context, in the orang asli context, we can refer to the highest law of the land, which is federal constitution. The rights under federal constitution recognize or guarantee the fundamental liberties in the federal constitution, which ranging from Article 5 until Article 13, which apply to all individuals, including orang asli. In contrast to Article 12 and Article 13, which provides on the rights to education and property, the rights to health is not provided in the federal constitution. All right, the right to health goes hand in hand. We argue that the right to health go hand in hand with basic rights of individuals, as Article 8 provides for equality, but the exceptions was mentioned in Article 8(5)(c), which mentioned that federal government is empowered to enact law that provide the well-being, the protection, well-being, or progress to the orang asli, including land reserve. This is in line with the list 1 of the 9th schedule, item 16 in the federal constitution, which state that the welfare of orang asli fall under the jurisdictions of federal government. That means the issue relating to the welfare of orang asli fall under the federal list. We argue that the welfare here refers to the health come within the ambits of welfare as well. Therefore, the Parliament has jurisdiction to make legislation related to the Orang Asli in accordance with Article 74, Clause 1, which Parliament can enact the law relating to the welfare of Orang Asli. And then the list 2 give the state's government authority over land, forestry, and agriculture. This jurisdiction authorizes the granting of permits for prospecting and mining and forcible taking of land. That means here, right to land or land matters is under state list. This quite irony here. The Orang Asli matters fall under federal list, and the land matter under state list. All right, we go further. Okay, here when we talk about land and Orang Asli here, to us, land is very important. Land is very important. It is identity for Orang Asli. It's a cultural aspect. It's also land is life for the Orang Asli. So if you did not recognize the land rights of Orang Asli, it will affect the well-being of Orang Asli. So in this research, in this presentation, we argue that the recognition of land is very important to support or to guarantee the health, the mental state or mental health of Orang Asli. And next, Article 5 of Federal Constitution also recognize liberty of person, which no one shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty, save in accordance with law. In this case, life here, we can refer to the case of Tan Teck Seng versus Education Services Commission. According to Gopal Sri Ram, the interpretations of life in Article 5, Clause 1 of the Constitution incorporates all important aspects of life that make up a quality of life, which is to us the right to health, within this ambit as well. Okay, I think running out of time, I should skip this one. The next is the Orang Asli Act. This is very important. The enactment of Act 134 based on the original Aboriginal enactment 1939, later amended in 1967 and 1974. This act enacted with 19 sections. It was enacted by the British colonies during the emergency period to prevent the spread of communist ideology to the Orang Asli. And the act has an element of paternalistic because the government is placed in a position that determine the life of Orang Asli. Unfortunately, the act does not provide the provisions on the rights to have to Orang Asli, even though this act was enacted to provide protections for the well-being of Orang Asli. If we look at the standard given by the UNDRIP, this is we can see the lacuna, we can see the loophole here, and we argue that there is a loophole or lacuna in the Act 134 and existing policy on the right on the Orang Asli right to health and healthcare as opposed to the international law standards. This is Malaysian health policy to improve the well-being of Orang Asli. We have various policy here. Rancangan Malaysia, Malaysian Plan, Wellness, PEGA, BAKAS, Community Feeding Program. A brief comparison with other countries, for example, with Philippines. They have quite comprehensive law pertaining to the health of indigenous people there. You can see here section 25, section 26, all are related to health. In Australia, they have specific National Aboriginal Torres Islanders health plan, and they also have specific organization you can see here. And for the purpose of improvement, we suggest 5. We suggest the state to legislate on the Orang Asli health, incorporate the right of Orang Asli health in the act, recognize the land of Orang Asli, improve the Orang Asli data facilities, and optimizations of Orang Asli infrastructure budgets that leads to the improvements of health services. In conclusion, Malaysian law on Orang Asli health is inadequate. The government should take initiative to recognize Orang Asli's right to health, which in line with UNDRIP. This is vital to ensure that the protections of Orang Asli rights is compatible with international law standards. With that, thank you very much. I'm exceeding 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much for that informative talk. I think it's a great way to get us started here. To keep the symposium on time, I think let's move on, but if anyone has questions, feel free to type them in and we can get back to them. So thank you again. Our next speaker is Nanjun. Nanjun is a postdoc at University of Malaya, and she'll be presenting on malaria. Nanjun, are you there and able to share your screen?
Hi, Vivek. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see my slides?
Yep, looks good. You can just make it bigger. We should be good to go.
So can everyone see my slides? Is it okay?
Yep, you're good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee for inviting me here today. So my name is Nanjun. I'm currently a postdoc at Department of Parasitology, Faculty of Medicine, University Malaya. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what I've done previously during my PhD, entitled Natural Human Infections with Plasmodium cynomolgi, Plasmodium innoi, and 4 other senior malaria parasites in Malaysia. So without further ado, let's start with a brief introduction about what is malaria. Malaria is a common and life-threatening disease in many tropical and subtropical areas. It is caused by Plasmodium parasites that commonly infects female Anopheles mosquito, which feeds on humans. Common symptoms of malaria include fever, shaking, chills that can range from moderate to severe, headache, and vomiting. Humans get infected with malaria when a Plasmodium parasite-infected mosquito bites them. So the parasites is then released into their bloodstreams, and furthermore, they grow and multiply first in the liver cells and then in the red blood cells, due to which the infected cells will burst open. Hence, the parasites growing inside the red blood cells will release the daughter parasites that continue the life cycle by evading other red blood cells. The blood stage parasites are responsible for causing the symptoms of malaria in humans. However, when these forms of parasites are ingested during the blood feeding by a female Anopheles mosquito, they begin a cycle of growth and multiplication in the mosquito, following which a form of the parasite called a sporozoites migrates to the mosquito salivary glands. So now, when the Anopheles mosquito sucks the blood from another human, anticoagulant saliva is injected together with the sporozoites, which then migrate to the liver, ultimately begin a new cycle. The scale-up of malaria control interventions has resulted in a substantial decline in global malaria cases and death. Despite this achievement, malaria remains a serious global health burden, resulting in 241 million cases in year 2020, and the annual malaria-associated mortality is approaching 627,000, with mortality burden borne primarily by children under 5 years old. However, in recent years, this sense has been complicated by the reports of increasing cases of malaria caused by the zoonotic malaria species. So, what is zoonotic malaria? Zoonotic malaria occurs when the people become infected with malaria species that are more commonly infecting non-human primate hosts such as apes and macaques. Malaria spreads when a mosquito becomes infected with the disease after biting an infected macaque, and the infected mosquito then bites a non-infected person. Malaria in humans was previously thought to be caused by 4 species of Plasmodium, namely Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malariae, and Plasmodium ovale. Zoonotic malaria was considered extremely rare until a large number of human plasmodium infections was reported in year 2004 from Kapit Division of Sarawak. Since then, Plasmodium knowlesi has emerged as an important human pathogen and now possesses as a substantial challenge to malaria elimination in the Asia-Pacific region, especially in Malaysia. As you can see here in this chart, Malaysia is currently facing a greater threat of increased zoonotic malaria infections caused by the Plasmodium knowlesi parasite. Zoonotic malaria infection has increased drastically from 376 cases in 2008 to 3,575 in 2021. So zoonotic malaria has now become one of the biggest challenge that hinder our national malaria elimination efforts. So Malaysia is located in the equatorial region, experiencing hot and humid climate throughout the year. Therefore, we are vulnerable and conducive for the transmission of malaria. Furthermore, with the two common species of macaque, which are the long-tail and pigtail macaque, that can be found in Malaysia, which harbor few other similar malaria species besides Plasmodium knowlesi, including Plasmodium courtneyi, cynomolgi, fudii, and inoi. It is possible that humans are actually at risk of acquiring other potential zoonotic malaria species. In the past decade, studies conducted in peninsular Malaysia have shown that malaria is common and largely concentrated among the Orang Asli population. Although they have mostly been resettled in the forest fringes, they still rely heavily on the forest for subsistence and constantly exposed to the malaria transmission. Furthermore, the low awareness or poor adherence among the Orang Asli towards the malaria disease might also cause the lack of involvement in the malaria control activities. Currently, information on the epidemiology of malaria infection among different indigenous communities in Malaysia has not been well explored. Therefore, this study attempts to investigate the current status of both human and simian malaria infection among the Orang Asli population. Besides that, we would also like to know whether, besides Plasmodium knowlesi, is there any other simian Plasmodium species circulating among the Orang Asli populations in Malaysia. So a total of 446 human archive blood samples, which have been previously collected between 2011 and 2014, were used in this study for the detection of 4 human and 5 simian species of Plasmodium. They were the community samples collected among the Orang Asli populations of various subtribes from 13 villages in 6 states of Malaysia. The genomic DNA was extracted, and then with the aid of molecular tools, the extracted DNA samples were then subjected for the detection of 4 human malaria species and 5 simian Plasmodium species with the species-specific primers. So 21.3% of the samples were actually positive for the malaria infection. And out of the 95 individuals that are positive with malaria, we found that 30 of them are actually infected with positive with human malaria species, including 6 Plasmodium falciparum, 21 Plasmodium vivax, 2 Plasmodium malariae, and 1 Plasmodium ovale. On the other hand, species-specific primers further identified 48 of them with that are infected with simian malaria species, including 37 Plasmodium knowlesi infection, 1 Plasmodium courtneyi, 9 Plasmodium cynomolgi, and 1 Plasmodium inoi. Plasmodium fudii was the only simian malaria species that was found absent in the samples. These cases were all mono-infections, and there were 17 individuals, 17 infections which we could not identify the species despite repeated attempts. Subsequently, we collaborated with Prof. Babir Singh and Dr. Paul Davis from UniMass Malaria Research Center to further confirm and characterize the 15 samples that were found positive with Plasmodium courtneyi, Plasmodium cynomolgi, and Plasmodium inoi based on another gene candidate. So in this case, we are targeting COX-1 gene. And we found that besides Plasmodium courtneyi, cynomolgi, and inoi, there were also presence of Plasmodium inoi-like and Plasmodium semi-ovale. So this study is the first large-scale description of malaria prevalence using community samples collected from different indigenous communities in Malaysia based on the molecular tools. The 37 Plasmodium knowledsi infections we detected originated from 6 states in Malaysia. It's confirming the widespread distribution of human Plasmodium knowledsi malaria cases in Malaysia. Besides that, our studies also highlights the occurrence of naturally acquired human infections with Plasmodium inoi-like, Plasmodium courtneyi, Plasmodium cynomolgi, and Plasmodium semi-ovale. All these simian malaria parasites would have been diagnosed by microscopy as human malaria parasites because they share the morphological similarities with human malaria parasites. So therefore, it is envisaged that screening with molecular tools of other communities living at the forest fringe will be better to demonstrate the widespread of distribution of zoonotic malaria and uncover more newly emergent malaria parasites. Considering none of the infected individuals identified from this study reported any signs and symptoms of malaria, we postulated that these individuals may be actually acting as the potential asymptomatic malaria carrier. Few previously published studies have illustrated the presence of asymptomatic malaria within the communities in Malaysia, which might be one of the challenges of malaria elimination program. We have published this data on emerging infectious diseases. So if you are interested to know more, then feel free to look up for it. So for our future studies, besides malaria infection, orang asli it's also prevalent. It's also prevalent with worm infections. So therefore, our next step is we would like to know what is the co-infection rate of the soil-transmitted helminth, or we know in more layman term, we will call it worm infections, and the malaria infection among the orang asli communities. And also, we will also like to know if the co-infection has any effects on their nutrition and anemia status. So currently, we have one master student, Manisha, is working on this project. Besides that, our group work a lot on gut microbiota. So therefore, we would also we are also interested to know what is the gut microbiota changes among the individuals with and or without the worm and malaria infection. Last but not least, we are also interested to know what is the pathogenesis of asymptomatic malaria. So whether the host genetic or the host immune response actually contributed to the asymptomatic malaria. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Nanjun. That was fantastic. We have one question here from the crowd. Tom Kraft asks, what explains the large difference in prevalence between the zoonotic malaria species? Can this be explained by differences in the non-human host species harboring them and their interactions with humans?
I think the large differences between that, it's maybe it's because of the human host, because knowledsi it's much more, I think the disease itself is much more developed in human. So cynomolgi, inoi, and other simian parasites are still considered new. So, and also because knowledsi has a very short life cycle, so it actually replicates in every 24 hours. So making it the parasitemia level, which means the number of parasites could actually double or triple within one day. So that's why Plasmodium knowledsi is the main cause of malaria death now currently in Malaysia. But unlike Plasmodium knowledsi, other simian malaria parasites might not be doing this in human hosts. So that's why we don't really see the significance yet of this zoonotic malaria species.
Okay, and then there's one more question from Ronald. Is the treatment approach to simian malaria different from human malaria? How would the Orang Asli be able to differentiate and respond accordingly for treatment?
Currently, the treatment for human and simian malaria species are the same, but because so they can actually, if they are not feeling well, they could identify they find themselves suspecting themselves with one of the malaria symptoms, then they can just visit any nearby clinic for treatment. So the treatment is always available. So one thing we want to highlight here is, even though the treatment is the same, but because of the source of the infection, currently Malaysia is on the track of eliminating malaria. So we have actually achieved 0 indigenous malaria cases for 3 consecutive years from 2018 to 2020. So indigenous malaria means local malaria cases, but these are looking at only at human malaria. So, but now since we have a lot of many cases, many simian malaria cases, so this actually highlight the source of infection are still there. So that's why even though the treatment is there, but we also need to educate the Orang Asli about and increase their awareness about this simian malaria infections.
Okay, thank you very much, Nanjun. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. And so our next presenter is Kamal. Kamal, are you there and able to?
Yep, I'm here, Vivek. I need you to, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Let me pull up
Okay.
your presentation here.
Yes, I need you to put up the slide. Thank you.
All right, let me just increase the size of this real quick.
Okay.
Okay, you can just say next when you want me to.
Okay. So as you quite rightly pointed out, Vivek, we've got over 50 slides there. This is, thanks to Professor Yvonne's effort. My presentation today is really acknowledging the work that we did last year and the collaboration with different agencies. So this is really a joint paper. I'm simply just presenting it on behalf of all those who were actively involved during that 2 weeks that we got this together. So the title of the paper is Raising Against Time, Reflection on the Orang Asli Lawan COVID Vaccination Efforts. Can we go to the next slide, please? Vivek, can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying. I don't know why it's not doing it.
Okay, we can move on.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, we can move on. We can move on to the next one, a collective effort, and then by mid-2021.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see in this diagram, this was a collective effort. It involves government agencies, civil societies, universities, and concerned citizens who came together to address the issue of vaccination of Orang Asli sometime last year. Can we go to the next slide, please? So by mid-2021, the number of Orang Asli cases, the number of COVID cases were increasing in Orang Asli communities. And by August, can we go to the next slide? By August 2021, COVID cases among Orang Asli communities were increasing at an alarming rate. And the concern was if they were to infect the communities in the interior, that would bring about other sets of challenges. So one challenge, of course, was how do we increase vaccination uptake among the Orang Asli? Can we go to the next slide, please? These were the agencies and civil society, some of the NGOs and government agencies that came together to address this question of vaccination among the Orang Aslis. Can we go to the next slide? To the timeline. So yeah, so we've got this amazing timeline. Everything really happened in a short period. And I just want to tell a story, perhaps if I remember correctly, and I'm sure Dr. Lin is here, Prof. Yvonne is here as well, and maybe Colin can jog my memory. But it all started with a conversation among a group of us in a WhatsApp chat. And somebody brought up the issue about, if I'm not mistaken, either orang Asli who were COVID positive and were not getting any response from the Ministry of Health, or they were quarantined and they could not get information. So it started out with that conversation between Dr. Ruzaslina, Waylin, myself, and Prof. Yvonne. The conversation started with Dr. Waylin wanting to know a bit more about the COVID impact on orang Asli as she was giving a talk that week. And then Dr. Lin brought up this issue about orang Asli groups or individuals who were not getting enough information. And then Prof. Yvonne reached out to some friends in the KKM. And that really started this whole idea of reaching out and seeing whether or not, you know, we could be more useful than simply recognizing there was a problem and then leaving it there. So at that point, Prof. Yvonne reached out to her friends in the Greater Klang Valley Task Force, and also we reached out to the Red Crescent, and we started this whole communication going. And from this small group, we extended to civil society partners, Colin Nicholas. We reached out to Gombak Hospital, Dr. Izandes. And at some point in that few days, this was all happening in 2 weeks, day by day. And at some point, we wrote a letter to the Minister of Health, YB Khairi Jamaluddin. And after that, you know, COAC drafted a document on advising on COVID protocol for orang Asli quarantine in their village, and also on how to regulate movement within their village. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, we can go to the next one. So these are some of our, the next one, sorry. These are some of our partners, Dr. Izandes from the Gombak Hospital, Director of the Gombak Hospital, Colin Nicholas from COAC, and then we had Tony, a concerned citizen. And can we go down to the next one? So this was the next slide, please, Vivek, sorry. Yeah, this was the letter we wrote to the minister at that time, Minister of Health, YB Khairi Jamaluddin, addressing the need to to what do you call this? To ask for, what was it? Yeah, so to recognize the urgency in speeding up vaccination among the orang Asli. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as a result of our collaboration together, some of the things that came out of the intervention were posters that were produced by Dr. Ruzaslina and her friends and translated into different orang Asli languages. Can we go to the next slide, Vivek? Yeah, so the rest of these are just examples of what was produced from that 2 weeks of conversation, recognizing that there was a gap in communicating COVID, as well as communicating the urgency for vaccination to both community and government. Okay, so the next slide, please. These are some of the posters that Dr. Ruzaslina had worked on with her friends. And if we go to the next one, the protocol, the community protocol that was prepared by COAC. The next one, please. Yeah. And then, of course, if we go down to the next slide, another group of, I don't know, concerned friends and civil society actors among themselves produce TikTok videos to inform and to promote awareness on COVID SOP, on what is COVID and vaccination and the likes. So there was a total of four videos Yeah, we can go down to the next slide, I think, Vivek. The next one. I might have to go back a bit, but let's go down to the next one first. Okay, so next one. So Dr. Rosaslina came up with new posters. The next one, please. Okay, yeah, the next one. So these are a series of 4 videos that were produced by Dayong, Faiza, Albert, and Elroy. So I'm not sure. So Elroy, I hope is around here. Elroy was with Rach, the star. Dayong and Faiza is with COAC and Jaringan Orang Asal se-Malaysia. And you've got Albert, who's with the family, the Film Freedom Festival. The 4 of them produced fantastic TikTok videos, providing information to Orang Asli about COVID, about vaccinations, and about COVID SOPs. Shall we go back up a bit? Vivek, sorry, can we go back up 2 slides to the government, getting the buy-in from relevant
I might have to go out of this. To do that.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm really excited to show the videos because they were fantastic work done by Dayong, Albert, and gang. So really the point of getting together was to get the government buy-in. And so we wrote to the minister, and then through the Greater Klang Valley Task Force, we were able to actually set up a meeting between the Deputy Director General of the Malaysian Ministry of Health with us, the University Malaya Group, but also extending the invitation to NGOs and indigenous community-based groups on the ground. The idea was, while it was the government who did a large part of the vaccination, they needed to work with communities to facilitate reception from the community on the ground towards COVID vaccination. And initially you've got, if you know the MOH or the structure at the local level, you've got the state Ministry of Education, Department of Education, and then you've got the various districts. So the buy-in from the highest level, from the MOH in Putrajaya, was really important and crucial, that allowed the doors to open if they needed help from the communities. And if I'm not mistaken, as Dr. Prof. Yvonne can probably tell us, that the collaboration did happen on the ground. In fact, she and her team also went down to vaccinate, I think, through the Gombak Hospital. So yeah, we met with the Deputy DG. We got NGOs to come and meet. Can we go to the next slide? Can we go past the videos, the TikTok videos? Yeah. So I think those are still online. If you can look for it, they're fantastic productions. They were done in a very short. They were produced like over 1 video 1 day or something. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Prof. Yvonne, for linking up the TikTok sites. So they were produced like 1 day 1 episode, and then they stretched to about 2 weeks when the final episode came out. It was really an amazing effort on their part. Can we go to the next 3rd or 4th slides down? 2 more. Okay, and this was the logo that I think it was Elroy who developed this, and Orang Asli child with a blowpipe shooting a COVID virus. It's actually animated, but not on our slides here. Okay. Maybe we can go to the next one. So the rest of our slides are just photos of the collaboration between the Red Crescent, the government on the ground, and their vaccination. Can we go to the next one? The next photo. The next photo, please. Next one, please. Yeah, the next one. Next one. Yeah. Can we follow the next one? Yeah. So there was also not just Gombak Hospital and other KKM and University Malaya, and also the Red Crescent, but there was also participation from RTM, the Orang Asli radio channel, Asyik FM, that also came together to help create awareness. Yeah, and thanks, Dr. Rosaslina, for linking up the Facebook page for the TikToks. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? And the next one. So the next one, please. So this, so there was, the Gombak Hospital organized a webinar on Orang Asli Lawan COVID in a presentation by Dr. Nohas Liza from the KKM. They acknowledge the joint efforts done between the university, civil society, and the MOH, Ministry of Health. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can we go all the way down to lessons learned? So, for us, this was a big partnership, that a big effort that demonstrated the possibilities that, you know, the kind of possibilities that we can do if we have this partnership between Orang Asli civil society actors, government agencies, universities, and NGOs working closely for a common purpose. The idea of this presentation actually came out to reflect on the lessons learned and shared insights on how, in recognizing the diversity in issues, gaps, and challenges in assessing COVID vaccination among different Orang Asli villages, spread out across different states in Peninsular Malaysia, and pulling together different expertise, experience, as well as different support network, can work towards better serving the needs of the Orang Asli community during a public health crisis. What I really want to emphasize here is that while it was within the university group that started this conversation, and using our networks through friendship as well as professional networks, that we brought together different actors, the work on the ground was really done between the partnership between indigenous NGOs, indigenous community actors on the ground, with the government. The university lecturers were really simply connecting people. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was also during a time of MCO, the movement control order. We weren't really allowed to move around much. Okay, and can we go to the last slide, or the next slide? The next one, please. So I really want to take this opportunity to thank these people. These are the guys who came together. We've got Dr. Izandis from the Hospital Gombak. We've got Dr. Chong, the Deputy Director General, Dr. Nur Hayati, Dr. Umi, Dr. Husnina, Dr. Haris, Dr. Hazlisa, Dr. Hamid, Dr. Lau. These are all from KKM. From JACOA, at that time, we have Professor Julie Edo, the former DG. We've got Azlan Muhammad, Cik Muhammad Rizwan. From COAC, we've got Colin Nicholas and Lily. From JOAS, we've got Dayong and Faiza. We've got Anthony William Hans, a semi-Orang Asli activist. From JACOSM, we've got Tija. From Malaysian Care, we've got Ita. And then you've got the university actors. Then you've got from UKM, Zanisa. From the Malaysian Red Crescent, Pozining, Sohana, and Dr. Chai. From Ashik FM, we've got Faizi Latun, and we've got Hadi. From Gerai OA, we've got Rita Rahim, another concerned citizen, Elroy. And from the Freedom Film Festival, we've got Albert. And really, one person I forgot to mention in more detail was Rita. Rita provided us the statistics. If Rita is here, she's amazing. Rita combed through the internet, wherever KKM gave out information, wherever JACOA gave out information, she compiled, analyzed it, and provided us with a better picture of the situation on the ground. So Rita really deserves a special mention. There was a lot of work that she put out, especially last year, in informing, you know, everyone through her Gerai OA updates on COVID, which she still continues to do. So I'm going to end here. So sorry for the sort of being all over the place. It's really hard trying to talk through a phone. Thank you.
Yeah, understandable.
And I hope
okay, thank you very much.
You can put up the slide. Yeah, I hope you can put up the slide so people can see it. That was done by Prof. Yvonne. For
sure. And thank you and your team for your heroic efforts to help out with these vaccination efforts. That's fantastic. Okay, so we should probably keep moving on here. I do see there is a healthy conversation here going on in the chat. We'll get back to some of these as we go. But next, let's move on to our next speaker. Thank you again, Kamal. We have Aya Kawai from the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies talking about research on Orang Asli demographics. Aya, are you there and able to share your screen?
Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yep, looks good.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, I can keep it if you can keep it at 10 to 12 so we can do questions, that would be great. But yeah, up to 15.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, I'm Maya Kawai. My presentation title is Demographics of the Orang Asli. I have been researching the Batak community of Kuala in Kelantan. And I have just started studying the demographic aspects, and today's presentation is a review of the previous studies. So I would appreciate any advice or comments on the subject. This figure shows the population change of the Orang Asli. The ivory part indicates the overall population, and the purple line at the bottom indicates the population changes of Negrito. The middle red line indicates that of Melayu Asli, and the green line indicates the population change of Senoi. We can see that the population has increased rapidly since 1980. To understand whether this trend is unique to Orang Asli or not, I show Peninsula Malaysia's population change next. This graph shows the population change of Peninsula Malaysia. We can see that the peninsula's population has increased rapidly since its independence, 1957. So this is different from Orang Asli. To see more detail, let's see. I have a table, the population change from 1931 to 97. Oh no, 2010. The AGR represents the average annual growth rate. I calculate like this. The AGR was the highest at 3.94 from independence to 1970, followed by 2.6 until 1980 and 2.38 from 1980 to 1991. However, it should be noted that this rate of increase includes moves in and out, though the AGR has remained relatively high in Peninsula Malaysia. And I also calculated the annual growth rate of the Orang Asli population. This is that. And this table shows the demographics of the Orang Asli. The highest annual rate, growth rate is 4.22 from 1965 to 1969. This is probably because many unregistered people were registered with the government as Orang Asli during that time. Then, as we have already seen, the growth rate from 1980 to 1996 is 2.47, and the AGR from 1996 to 2010 is 3.93. This should be related to an increase in the birth rate or and decrease in the mortality rate, which is probably related to the popularization of modern medical care and lifestyle changes. We will now look at the population changes in the three official categories. Okay. This table shows the population change of Negrito, Senoi, and Melayu Asli. since 1960. The 2018 data is from the website of the National Statistics Department. And while the others are based on data from the Orang Asli Department. It may be related to some data collection methods that the population growth rate has slowed sharply from 2010 to 2018. So this, we need to see this value really carefully. And the AGR were very high until 2010. Next, I'd like to show specific changes by population groups, different groups. Okay. I have conducted fieldwork at Kualako in Kelantan for about 10 years. And this area was a single riverine area until in the 1970s. The alluvial water slipped, and the Bate foraged over a wide area during that time. Kirk Endicott and Karen Endicott conducted the first research at that time. And at that time, the Bate of Kualako were also intermarried with the Sumaburi of Sungai Beruar in Terengganu. They traveled upstream through the upper reaches of Terengganu, which is now under a dam lake. Kuchikura conducted his first research in the Sumaburi community at that time. Then, since the 1990s, Odani has been conducting research at Post Lebel. Of course, the Bateks here are relatives of the Kualako people. So today, I refer to the work of Kuchikura and Odani as they are studies on relatives of the Kualako people. In addition, Jones has been conducting field research on Jahai at Sungai Roa, near here, upstream of the Purgao in Kelantan since the 1970s. I will also refer to his study from a demographic perspective. I present my data as well as the research of these three researchers at Sungai Rural, Post Lebel, and Sungai Beruar. I am still in the early stages of the literature review, so please let me know if you know of any other previous studies on other groups. Kuchikura's data is, this is Sungai Rural. Sungai Rural is a settlement created in 1972, located near Jelly, Kelantan. The AGR from 1978 to 1988 is 2.79, and that of 1990 from 1990 to 1988 to 1998 is 2.61. The population is considered to be growing steadily until 1998. As Jones calculated the maternity rate, I listed it on the chart. It is the average number of live births per woman, which differs from TFR, total fertility rate. And mortality rates were also listed on the slide, and those are very high. And this is for Sungai Beruar. Kuchikura's data is on specific Keene people in Sungai Beruar rather than all populations there. The population growth rate here is very high. Very high. AGRs are over 5 from the 1990s here. To determine whether a decrease in mortality or an increase in fertility is more strongly related to this population growth, I also listed the mortality rate and the total fertility rate here, TFR, which is calculated for the cohort. It is necessary to examine the infant mortality rate and other details. However, I will skip such detail as time for this presentation is limited. At a glance, it seems that the increase in the fertility rate is primarily related to population growth, because this means that those women would have given birth, including the base birth, more than 9 times. Okay, so let me move to post-reveal next. Okay, still have time. For the post-reveal, the data are more recent from 2008 to 2010 and detailed. The growth rate here, is the natural growth rate calculated by Odani based on death and birth in the year in respect each year. Then the AGR is the growth rate which I calculated based that includes moves in and out. The mortality rate is between 1 to 2 here, but the TFR, total fertility rate, is high between 6 to 9. This means that women in post-reveal give birth 6 to 9 times in their lifetime, which is very different from Japan. Then this is for Kualako. The Kualako locates near Tamanagara, and Bate observed reveal use that area. And the Kualako was established in the middle 1990s. Then those indicates there are some very big events so far. And the people at Kualako, especially the younger generation and certain families, tend to migrate in and out very often. So I am still analyzing how to define the population. So I report tentative values today. The AGR from 2010 to 2014 is 2.5. And from 2014 to 2019 is 2.59. Those are high, but not high as Sungai Brewer. The mortality rate is similar to other villages, but possibly higher than this value because I have probably failed to track this in recent years. And TFR is as high as 4.38 and 3.65, but it does not reach very high values such as 9 or 8. I still need to calculate the population numbers for this TFR carefully as well, because I think I include the women of other villages for my calculations. However, the TFR Kualako is lower than that of Post-Reveal and Sungai Brewer. I'm thinking it may be related to the fact that the first marriage age in Kualako was not outstandingly low until around 2016. 2019, and women's physical conditions relating to their habits, including food restrictions, and so on. However, their lives have been changing rapidly since the 2020s, especially after the measles outbreak. So, and many younger women are getting married and having babies. So these figures are expected to change very rapidly. Oh, almost time. So let me summarize some points to conclude. The Orang Asli population shows the highest growth rate from 1980 to 2010. On the other hand, Peninsular Malaysia had the highest population growth rate right after its independence. However, these ratio numbers are based on registration with the government and do not deal exclusively with natural increase. The AGR of Sungai Buloh is above 5, which differs from that of Lobel, Rual, and Kuala Lumpur. I need to analyze more carefully later, but this may have something due to the difference in social practices between them, as the Sumaburi Sungai Buloh population are Sumaburi, and which belongs to Senoi, and their social relation and everyday practices are different from that of Negritos, Bates. And then the TFR of Kuala Lumpur is lower than that of Lobel, which requires further analysis. So this is the references. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Aya. It's great to see your work on this new topic. Let's keep things going unless there's a... Okay, well, we do have one question, Aya. Jeffrey Benjamin asks, do you have any information on changes in duration of breastfeeding over the years among these study populations? You're muted, Aya.
Sorry. Excuse me. Could you repeat again?
Do you have any information on changes in the duration of breastfeeding over the years among?
No, I don't have.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's being asked in relation to how this might impact the demographics, but that's okay. No worries.
I'm sorry. I breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding, like a mother feeding the infant milk.
Oh, okay. Only for Kuala Lumpur I have. Because they use the how do you say? Is it okay if I use bahasa Melayu?
Sure.
Mereka guna tu teh gula guna tu botol the bagi cucu. So they don't breastfeed often. So Kuala Lumpur people, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No worries. We can continue this conversation. Yeah. Thanks again, Aya. Okay, so let's move on to our next speaker. We have Justine and Rachel talking about Orang Asli perception towards suffering events. Justine, are you okay to share your screen?
Yep, I'm okay to share my screen.
Okay, terrific. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay. Hi, so my name is Justine, and this is a presentation.
Sorry, Justine, can you just make your screen large, please?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks again.
Is it better? Is it okay now? I think it's hanging. Okay, got it?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, yep. So this was a research that myself and my co-author, Dr. Rachel, conducted on the perceptions of suffering among a hunter-gatherer tribe in Malaysia, specifically the Tamia, who are one of the larger ethnic groups out of the 18 ethnic groups of Orang Asli in Malaysia. And mainly they were located in the Perak, Kelantan, and Pahang regions. So for our field research, for our study, we focused on an area called Post Kema in Hulu, Perak. So this is just a hand-drawn map of one of our research team of some of the villages in the area. They are about 16 official villages, but there are actually a lot more tiny villages, informal ones that popped up as we went and explore the area. So our study was mainly, as I mentioned, to explore the Tamia's perceptions, explanations, and help seeking when it comes to suffering. And we managed to interview a total of 43 participants and conducted a thematic analysis on, through consensual qualitative coding on how they perceive and attribute their suffering events. And in terms of our findings, what we found was that a lot of them reported suffering events pertaining to a lack of basic needs, land right issues, and unjust treatment from authorities. So in terms of how they made sense of their suffering or how they commonly attributed their suffering, the majority of them actually linked their suffering to their external environment. So for example, the destruction of the forest, their human-animal conflict and loss of resources, and also a lot of it was linked to how the local government neglected to protect their land rights and neglected to develop their environment, their existing infrastructure and environment. When we conducted a cultural mapping of the sub-themes that emerged based on a framework, we also did notice that the majority of sub-themes seem to fall into more of an external focus and more of a concrete kind of perceptual thinking. And this was interesting because, contrast to a lot of mainstream psychology theory, they seem to have more of a mentality that focused on the external environment. To them, their environment, their forests, their land was the most salient when it came to even attribution of their suffering. And it was a very concrete kind of attribution whereby it was all linked to specific situations that they were facing environmentally. And just to go through some theoretical implications, I forgot to mention, when we went into the area of study, post-Kema, we did notice that there were multiple religious groups there, mainly, Christian groups, Muslim groups, as well as villages who continue to practice their own traditional spirituality. So after we conducted this exploratory study, this study into their perception, we did notice that there were some minute variations in the way that they would talk about their suffering among the different religious communities, where we followed up later on with additional data collection and statistical analysis did show that there were some slight variations between the three groups in terms of the kind of words they use to describe and to talk about their suffering. But I won't be going into that here today. Just something for follow up. And in terms of theoretical implications, what we found was that generally it proposed that there should be an inclusion of internal and external aspects of coping in suffering into religious coping theory. And also in terms of policy implications, it was our findings aligned with UN Sustainable Developmental Goals, whereby sustainable forest management should be included in terms of development for the Orang Asli, as well as for policymakers to account for cultural safety in all kinds of developmental schemes. And for intervention, implications of our study also proposed that focusing on the environment, the traditional landscapes, and promoting the inclusion of local community into the planning and development of their of their health interventions could be helpful in the long run. Similarly, when it comes to mental health implications, there should be more community-based mental health programs where you integrate holistic spiritual factors such as the environment and such as their land into mental health practices. So that's all from me, and I'll pass the time over to my co-author, Dr. Rachel, if she has anything else to add.
Do you have more slides, Justine, after this?
Nope, that's all.
No, that's the last slide. Can you go up to the ERF framework?
Yeah.
Just to elaborate, adding a bit more details. We are clinical psychologists, and we have been practicing for years. While as we don't want to impose a Western diagnosis into Orang Asli, we think it's not culturally sensitive because they have their own perception of wellness and mental illness. So our first step is using more anthropological approach to conduct semi-structured interviews. And we conducted in-depth interviews after the cultural immersions so that we can really immerse ourselves from their worldview, trying to see from their worldviews, how do they interpret their suffering events without categorizing it as mental illness or diagnosing them, although we have the capability to do so. But at the same time, we found that their language of sufferings are affected by their perception. And then here we use an evolutionary psychology theory, because we think that Orang Asli still maintain and keep the very primitive type of thinking style perceptions. They still see the world differently than the modernized people. They see the world in a more intact and concrete format, including spiritual realms that is part of their life. So we term it as a concrete thinking styles, which is more holistic, which is something that urbanized individuals or westernized countries have lost. This kind of instincts, primitive instinct and way of thinking and rationalizing with things. And we think that in order for us to really want to know how to carve our mental health intervention sensitively, we need to know how they think and without imposing our way of interventions. So I think just like any other speakers have said, land is part of their resilience. It's externally oriented. Spiritually, tradition is part of their resilience. It's externally oriented. And also the rituals is part of their emotional regulations. So these are all our major findings from coding the interviews and from linguistic analysis. So we have done much more than this in the past 3 years through Justine's PhD thesis. And 2 of the manuscripts have been accepted by Cultural Psychiatry Journal, and another journal is called Psychology of Religions. So our job, our mission is to advocate for culturally sensitive interventions in all aspects of mental health interventions. And then we try to adopt a whole health approach when we want to really build their resilience, their cultural identity, and their self-image. So this is our major findings, and we welcome any collaboration from different disciplines, but we have to say it's quite rare for psychologists to do this kind of research with Orang Asli. And we have another team that will present next, so I will save time for them.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Very interesting. If I can ask one question, what about young children? When it comes to things like deforestation, what is your view on how they're processing that as trauma or not? Do you have any data or observations that might inform that question?
We don't have data specifically, and the reason for that is because their definition of children is very different from ours as well. So below 18, many very young, in our perspective, children already could have been acting in a more adult roles by the time they were in their early teens. But in terms of from our exposure and our interaction with some of the people there, a lot of the young people are increasingly going into more urban communities. So what we're seeing is that a lot of the younger generation have left to study or to work in the cities that they are nearby. So there is that kind of like difference between the very young generation with the older generation in terms of their perception towards the environment. However, that being said, we also encountered many young people who, after they have left to the city to work, they come back saying that they are more comfortable with their home in the post-Kama because of how you say here, if we have no money, we can find food. If we have no money, we can plant our food. We don't have an issue. Whereas over there, when we work, every money we earn, we have to spend it on rental, we have to spend it on food, on transportation. So they find it very stressful. So we did find a lot of young people who have left, according to their parents, oh, my child has left. And we found a whole bunch of younger community who came back and saying that they still find that it's easier for them to rely on their natural environment and their forest lands.
I think just to adding, we are not investigating generation trauma, but if you are implying that if there's an episode of trauma, I think the older generation might have more exposure to war. We hear more story from the older generation talking about the Second World War, how Japanese invade Malaysia, how the Malaysian communists invade their countries, and later on how Malaysian armies also invade the villages. So many round of invasion from outsiders to the village. In terms of the harm of deforestation, I would say that it's to everyone. It's a gradual harm rather than it's an episodic traumatic event. So we didn't study episodic trauma, but then the overall the animal and human conflicts, I think that's there. That if we want to study, we could, because a lot of villagers are afraid of elephants that come out to destroy their village to look for food because of deforestation. So I think this is an evolving traumatic or destructive event that we could follow up on. Thank you for your suggestions.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Well, we should probably move on, and we're going to move on next to you speaking, Rachel, on psychosocial determinants of healthcare utility. Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah.
Yes, my assistant.
I'll be sharing my screen.
Can I ask also Justine to help answering the Q&A questions? I
Sure.
think some very important questions there. Just Durat, can you share your screen? So we have a team that work hard on this second project after pandemic. So those data we collect in post-Kama was before pandemic, and after lockdown, we cannot access it. So we switched to Selangor State, Orang Asli, which allows us to, it's an easier access populations. And it was based on an FRGS project, that grant that we received about 2-3 years ago before pandemic. So we have been banned to do any fieldwork for 2 years until just this year recently. So this data is based on the early of 2022. We made 2 field trips, and then we did similar interviews, open-ended structure interview. Dora, can you go to the next slide about the research background and aim? So we look at their perspective of illness, perception of illness, experience, what type of illness that you experience. How do you explain your illness? Why do you think you had this illness? And how did you seek help? So those are the interview questions. And lastly, what do you think will be a barrier or facilitator for you to seek modern healthcare facilities? So this is a pilot study we done in the suburban Selangor area. We also want to see how it differs from the more remote villagers that we interviewed before, to see if the locations of their residency will affect the different perceptions. So we did similarly team coding, thematic codings, consensus qualitative codings, and those are the pictures we took in the fieldwork. And I will pass it to Dura next, right? to talk about our findings based on the codings.
Hold on.
I think we should go to the type of illness first, right? Who is
Yeah.
doing that? Sorry, I forgot.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, type of illness. I will explain. So while Dura is looking for the slide, hi, my name is Adrian, part of the Dr. Rachel's team. So we have 5 themes for the illnesses that we categorize from the qualitative. We have physical symptoms, so like flu symptoms, coughing, fever, the normal fever. So that's a physical symptoms. So yeah, this is the 5 themes under illnesses. We sorted from the biggest percentage. We have like 14, so 70% of them talking about the physical symptoms. And we can go to the next slide. We will see the quotes and the sub-themes. So as I mentioned, physical symptoms like fever, for example, coughing, fever, and then the physical pain and discomfort, like body discomfort, they feel unwell, but didn't mention any particular illness, just feeling discomfort on their body. And then the chronic symptoms, chronic illness like cholesterol, diabetes. And the 4th category or the 4 themes probably is a hard work of Dr. Kamal and colleagues in preventing like COVID, because not many people mention about COVID, but we met people mention about TB, tuberculosis. And the last category or the last theme is deaths of family members. It become like because the illness, but we categorize the theme into one category because resulting death of the family member. So the models of the illness, I will pass to Dura to explain about the next finding. Thank you.
Right. So we asked the participants in regards to the illnesses that they experienced. So how or why did they get the illness? So how did they explain the reasons for their illnesses? So these answers could be grouped together in these 5 themes, with the most common explanatory model being lifestyle related, followed by half of the participants attributing the illnesses to religious, spiritual, traditional reasons, and then a tie between medical and natural explanations, followed by socio-political explanations. So here's a breakdown of the sub-themes and quotes for your reference. So what we would like to highlight here actually are some explanatory models unique or more prevalent to the Orang Asli community, showcasing the mismatch between life in the village versus life in the city. So this includes the lifestyle-related explanations, religious, spiritual, traditional explanations, and the socio-political explanations. So for the religious, spiritual, traditional explanation in particular, with half of the participants attributing the illness to it, you can see that disturbances by spirits were prominent explanations made by the Orang Asli community. And for the socio-political explanation, it was evident that a number of them found the city life and work environment to be harmful towards their well-being. Pass it to Justin now.
Yeah, so for help-seeking behaviors, we found that a majority of them, all of them really, were very comfortable with seeking modern healthcare services. Meanwhile, a majority of them continue to also seek religious, spiritual, traditional resources in tandem with modern healthcare. And some also reported employing more of like personal adaptation and self-care methods. This could be also because near the community that we interviewed over here, there was a very well-equipped hospital, a government hospital for Orang Asli. Okay, next. So you can see over here that for modern healthcare, a lot of them mentioned going to the hospital or going to the clinic down there. It was quite near to the village, so it was very accessible, and there was a bus as well that could go there. Meanwhile, a lot of them also said that while they also go to the hospital, at the same time, there are certain kind of illnesses that require them to seek out religious healing. They have a differentiation whereby some illness is for medical to be healed, and some illness is for spiritual, religious ways to be healed. So they will do both usually. In terms of self-care, in terms of personal adjustment, it was mainly referring to things like eating healthily, and reducing consumption of modern food. Modern food in reference to things like oil, or certain fruits that are imported. Interestingly, we had one participant who mentioned that fruits that are imported, we shouldn't be eating that so much. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'll pass on time to Dura, who will talk about determinants to access modern healthcare.
Dura, you are mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you. Okay.
Then
Can you talk now?
hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
For the determinants, so we also ask them on the determinants for them in accessing modern healthcare, as in what are the potential facilitators or barriers for them going to the hospital. So these determinants were grouped together in these themes according to frequency, which are personal factors, infrastructure factors, hospital or healthcare services factor, communal level factors, and policy factors. So this is a systemic representation of the sub-themes and codes of their determinants in accessing modern healthcare. So it is evident that the Orang Asli's healthcare utilization needs to be seen from these different perspectives, from personal factors such as having to consider their dependents to be taken care of at home when seeing the doctor, all the way to policy level factors such as having the Department of Orang Asli Development, JAKOA, providing subsidized healthcare to them. So we are hoping that these multifaceted determinants are taken into consideration for relevant stakeholders, policymakers, and NGOs in understanding what influences their healthcare utility, rather than just focusing on the logistics or infrastructure aspect, for example. So here are just some of the quotes taken from the participants in sharing what influences their decisions in accessing modern healthcare. So overall, the sub-themes and quotes just reinstate the fact that when you want to question as to why the Orang Asli decides to use or not use modern healthcare services, it's important to really understand the various psychosocial determinants that plays a factor in this, such as having free time, their perceived effectiveness of modern health treatment, and their own satisfaction with healthcare centers and services.
Okay. So lastly, I think just to recap everything, we do all this is to give voice to the voiceless populations, and we hope their voice will be amplified here by knowing that they still value their traditional healing system, and usually the order of help seeking is of their illness is they go to the traditional healers first. And after it didn't work, then they will go to the modern healthcare. And whereas all of them are quite open in Selangor state nearby, because the Hospital Gombak is nearby, accessible. And then I think Hospital Gombak did a good job in outreaching. Many villages we talked to, they have been vaccinated, and there is a lot of propaganda vaccinations going around. So I think just now matched to the previous speakers that talk about all their promotional activities during COVID. So in terms of the perceptions, again, their thinking styles, they still look for traditional explanations and spiritual explanation for their illnesses. So I think we still want to value their worldview, and we don't think it conflicts with modern science because they still hold on to that worldview while seeking modern help. The only voices I want to amplify here is that one of the interviewees did say that they're afraid the government will take away their women and children, because every time when the pregnant woman go to the hospital, they will be hospitalized for more than 1 month, and they lost their wife to the hospital. This is from the husband perspective. And then they don't know what's happening. And the woman who is being confined during the hospital waiting for the leprosy for the labor also feel very isolated and lonely because they have been taken away from the community support and they miss their other children as well. So that's the part that we hope the government agency maybe can think of other alternative way rather than taking the woman away directly, and maybe have more understanding, mutual understanding between the two parties. Okay, that ends our presentations.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't see any immediate questions here, so why don't we just go ahead and continue. Our next presenter is May. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, talking about the Orang Asli microbiome from Monash University. Are you able to share your screen?
Sorry, hold on. Oh, can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, then I will start my presentation. Hi, I'm Simei, a postgraduate student from Jeffrey Chai School of Medicine and Health Sciences, Monash University, Malaysia. Thanks to the organizing committee for providing this wonderful platform to share our OA research. Topic I will be presenting today is Orang Asli and microbiomes. We'll start with some of the field trip pictures of my research group led by Prof. Maud Phipps. Before the pandemic, we engaged with several OA groups, including Jahai and Temuan. Basic medical checkups, questionnaire and sample collection are the main components in our field work. As we know, although OA are divided into 3 main groups, they are highly heterogeneous with their unique identities. The term diverse can be used to describe OA and also suitable to describe the human microbiome. So what are the human microbiomes? The human microbiomes refer to a collection of microorganisms in our body, which could include bacteria, fungi, and archaea. They're regarded as our second genome, a main source of genetic diversity, and a functional entity which can influence our health, immunity, and metabolism. Technological advancement in DNA sequencing enable us to characterize the human microbiome, and many factors such as host genetics, diet, living environment, and health can affect the microbial composition and density. However, the studies are complex, as composition in each body sites are unique, but there are also high interpersonal variations for the same site. Most attention was given to the gut microbiome, which were linked to various diseases. The general consensus is that healthy microbiome profiles are those with diverse microbial species, while less diverse profiles enriched with pathogenic species are the so-called perturbed microbiome related to the disease state. In terms of research trajectory, since the launch of Human Microbiome Project, a surge of interest and publication was observed, especially after 2015. However, we can also see that there is an uneven representation in terms of the sites of study. Gut microbiome, represented by the blue line, are the best characterized, while the nasal microbiome remain heavily understudied. Although widely known as a colonization site for many pathogenic species, there are very limited sequencing-based nasal microbiome studies. So we know the vastness of human microbiome community from past literature, and their links to our health and well-being. As for the interest to study nasal microbiomes in OA, firstly, past studies have revealed uncharacterized microbes in indigenous gut and oral cavity, but so far only one has focused on the nasal cavity. Secondly, living or even working environment was significantly associated with nasal microbiome in other populations. Can we observe the association in Orang Asli as well? So this study focused on 3 OA groups, namely Temuan, an urbanized Proto-Malay subgroup living in Selangor, Temia, a Senoi subgroup from Kelantan, Wamusang, and Jahai, a Negrito subgroup in the Belum rainforest. The study aims to characterize nasal microbiomes of OA living in distinctive environments and also to test if their nasal microbial composition and abundance are associated with factors including gender, smoking status, and obesity. Briefly, the methods used for sample collection and processing, which begin with collection of nasal swabs, followed by lab processing for 16S RNA gene amplification and bioinformatic analysis for microorganism identification and classifications. Following slides show my study results. Alpha diversity, or the within sample dissimilarities, was measured using phyloevenness and Shannon diversity. To the left, significant difference in alpha diversity was observed between the 3 OA groups. The Jahai forest dwellers show the highest alpha diversity compared to rural Temia and urban Temua. Image on the right depict differences in species evenness between healthy and obese participants, in which the microbial composition in healthy individuals are more evenly distributed than their counterpart. Significance of obesity has yet to be reported in previous nasal microbiome studies, but it is not that surprising, as obesity were also linked to respiratory diseases and reduced lung function. So there could be a complicated factor underlying the influence of obesity on nasal microbiomes. On this slide, we can see a PCOA plot based on beta diversity distance, which measure the between sample dissimilarities. In this plot, each dots represent a sample colored based on the OA groups. The closer the dots are, the higher similarities they share. So most of the green circles representing the Jahai rainforest community cluster away from the urban Temuan and rural Temia communities, reflecting group differences in overall nasal microbiome composition. In addition to OA group, stat analysis also linked gender and obesity to overall microbiome composition difference, although the figure is not shown here. Next, this taxonomy bar plot showed phylum level microbial composition found in all the Orang Asli participants. Each sample is represented by a bar, and the bars are clustered based on their OA groups. Consistent with the beta diversity results, we can observe visible differences between the OA groups. From the left, we have the Jahai, which show higher representation of bacteria belong to the phylum of Proteobacteria. We can also see the microbial community presented a different patterns compared to Temia in the middle and Temuan, the urban community, at the right. Nasal microbiomes in OA were dominated by 4 main phyla, as shown here: Actinobacteria, Firmicutes, Proteobacteria, and Bacteroidata, consistent with past nasal microbiome studies. As the phylum levels is too broad, not specific enough, further analysis in genus level are performed, and this slide shows the result. This bar plot shows all genera with abundance difference after pairwise comparisons between the OA groups. Here, I focus on those exceeding my effect size threshold, indicated by the black dotted lines. In the red boxes, the Temia had higher abundance of genera belonging to the Archaea community. Interestingly, these halophilic taxa were not well studied in the context of nasal microbiome, but were usually associated with environment with high salt concentration and in-gut microbiome. For the green boxes, as we have previously observed enriched of Proteobacteria in Jahai community, when looking into the genus level, an uncultured genus belong to Nasoria family also occurred in higher abundance for the Jahai community. Past literature has reported its enrichment in healthy populations when compared to rhinosinusitis patients. To summarize, this study characterized the nasal microbiomes in healthy adult OA living in different habitats, and appreciable differences were observed. This difference could be a composite effect of living in different environments with varied urbanization rates and pollution levels, in addition to factors including lifestyle, diet, cultural practices, which varied based on the OA groups. This study also revealed influences of gender and obesity on OA nasal microbiome, but not by smoking status, although we acknowledge that there is a sample size limitation. Taxa with known association to respiratory health such as Corynebacterium or Staphylococcus, was detected in this data set, but not significantly different in abundance between the OA groups. This reflects the healthy OA cohort in this study shared their main composition, but there are still several taxa with abundance difference which worth further exploration. So this comes to the end of my presentation, some of my reference and my appreciation to all the participants and those who have helped in this study. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I have one quick question. You talked a little bit about diet. Have you collected any data, or do you think it would be useful to collect like very specific dietary data at the individual level? Would that help make more sense of the results as well? Like very specific species level dietary information?
Yeah, so for the diet, we did not manage to collect their dietary intake information, partly due to we could not go back to like pay follow-up visits, but also because obesity was not an expected factor. So, and then because past literature also shown that the oral microbiome could be quite different from the nasal microbiome. So dietary, because there are too many factors that could play into the nasal microbiomes, that we did not manage to collect them all.
Mm-hmm. And then there's one question in the chat here asking if the samples were collected before or during the COVID pandemic, and if you'll be associating these data with any particular diseases like respiratory diseases among these groups.
Oh, so the samples were all collected before the pandemics, and due to the tight time frame, we did not manage to have any follow-up after COVID. And yeah, and then if we will collect after COVID, then we will need to take into another consideration on the COVID factor, because species like some taxa like Prevatola were found to be in higher abundance for those with COVID. So then that will be a whole new other study that we can explore. So in terms of respiratory disease, we solely depend on self-reported, because there is not there's no complete medical records for us to refer to. So, but there are we recruited participants with no severe disease at the time of the recruitment. Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to our next talk. We'll be hearing from Hanisham Khalid from University Utara, Malaysia. Are you available to share your screen?
Yeah, sure, will do. Just give me a couple of seconds, please.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Good evening and good morning for those of you in the other part of the world. My name is Hanisham. So I'm from University of Utara, Malaysia. Currently, I was attached into law school and also to Dr. Mahathir Institute of Thought in University of Utara, Malaysia. And tonight's topic, I would like to talk about the aspect of Industrial Revolution 4.0 and butterfly effect to the Orang Asli in Malaysia. I begin with my introduction. What is digital divide? Digital divide is a difference between the amount of information between those who have access to internet and those who have not. And the lack of access is believed to be disadvantaged due to amount information was said to be available online. In the era of the globalization today, not only ICT seems to be a necessity, but being acknowledged as a facility to support development for a particular community. So the outline I'm going to tell us, starting with introduction, then follow with the IR 4.0, and finally at the end, I'll talk about a little bit conclusion. Okay, moving on to the next slide. as I mentioned just now, what are digital divide, as I mentioned to you earlier, and what is IR 4.0? Undeniably, IR 4.0 or Industrial Revolution 4.0 is an ongoing automation of the traditional manufacturing and industrial practicing using the smart technology. If you can see, the combined, it started from the Industrial Revolution of the 70th centuries. Now it moved to the phase 4. And in other words, it's going to affect life in many aspects, such as economic, social, cost, privacy, and others. To give you a good understanding, what is digital divide is, in other words, what versus IR 4.0, the successful of such IR 4.0 lies in early development of the particular society, that's why I'm borrowing the terms, butterfly effects, from the mathematical terms. Right. In other words, early adoption of society will change a lot at the end. To give you a simple analogy, if you watch a Star Trek movie, what is the first prime directive? Is not to interfere with the culture, which are the pre-warp generation. In other words, they don't have pre-warp, then the Starfleet will not come and meet them or first contact. So it goes in like this. So in other words, like a first contact for the Orang Asli in the short term. And the butterfly effect could be defined as the effect could a modest diverge in the early stage of development, and which have a significant implication in later on development, according to Stewart 1990. Right. In general, Malaysian population, we have approximately about 32.67 million in the third quarter of 2021. By January, third quarter 2020, as January 2022, we have approximately 27.43 million of internet users, which are increased 89% compared to 2001. In other words, why this increase? I believe the COVID-19 has accelerated such development or depending on the internet as such. And furthermore, there were approximately about 42.11 million mobile connections in Malaysia, which is lead 4.0% compared to 2001. As the chart show below, the internet user keep increasing over the year as projection show up about 33.5 million in 2025. Right, move on to the digital evolution in Malaysia. In other words, according to study, we found out that most of internet user people, how they spend time on the internet. Moving on, despite the overwhelming of percentage in the internet usage of mobile connectivity, the findings do not reflect overall scenario. For instances, the affordability of purchasing device is just only 57.75%. Malaysia found to have capability to do so. In other words, it reflects the consistency of the consumer level of digital adoption readiness, which is like about 73.66%. And the current effort, if you can see what the government has done, if you can look on the National Strategic Framework for Bridging Digital Divide, NSFBDD, which devising in 9 Malaysian plans from 2006 until 2009, have to narrow out the gap. And the telecenter also been established to provide access in the internet and ICT. This is until 2010. But when COVID-19, when we conduct online interview with one of the senators, YB Senator Mat Isa, he mentioned that although they have government have introduced us with My Sejahtera apps, which is to indicate your health or you're reporting yourself if you are being infected COVID-19. But in certain area, they do not have connection or mobile connection at all. So how the apps would be function in that particular area brings up the concern. So I'm not going to elaborate further how the Orang Asli, but mainly Orang Asli could be divided into 3 main tribes as follow in the figure 2. Moving on, I'm touching on a little bit based on the data from Jakwa itself in 2018, because education has closely on the computer literacy. But the data from 2009 until 2017, it showed up what we call as decreasing number of dropout students, okay, into the Form 1. In other words, they are Orang Asli itself well aware about the education. And in other words, when come to the Orang Asli matter, it seems there are some issue, okay, we are still struggling on changing around. For example, if we can say that Windows have changed from Windows, now we know have known Windows in 2019, their new latest version of Windows. So all this program inside those kind of Microsoft, for example, have developed. So these kind of changes somehow have effects the Orang Asli. All right, and undeniably, the digital divide is not just a problem for urban and rural community Orang Asli. Due to we received this fundamental research grant from Minister of Higher Education on late in 2019, and we managed to embark 2 months, okay, January and February of 2020, before MCO been declared. So they've been cut on our wings to go to explore further research. But in that 2 months, we managed to go to the Bukit Lanjan, Bukit Lanjan considered as a developed area, town area, and we could see they still using the mobile device. But on the other upper hand, like laptop and desktop, normally they will be operate in what we all consider as a luxury item. So as to correlate our finding correlate with other studies, and besides, furthermore, as I mentioned to you earlier, geographical location and infrastructure education also play a main component in reducing digital divide. And based on 2018 Jakwa data indicate that dropout Orang Asli, as I mentioned earlier, steadily decreased and could be deduced as a good indicator that Orang Asli are gearing up for next coming challenge, especially in IR 4.0. And furthermore, another issue being challenged by Orang Asli is cost of maintaining those gadgets like laptop, PCs, and other peripherals, which could be costly to them. And in conclusion, I believe this paper could create awareness as initial development of IR 4.0, which could significantly affect the livelihood of Orang Asli. As I mentioned to you earlier, a culture would affect of a culture, whether they have a negative impact or positive impact, undeniably is that. And currently, the state of digital device is not attainable stage where the various factors should be considered, especially in the rural part area. Right, and furthermore, our research also aligned with the research of Bala Intan in 2021. And for future research, we would like to emphasize on the focus on looking on how policies and legal provision could play a role in promoting digital participation of Orang Asli. With that bombshell, thank you very much for attending my presentation. Back to you, Vivek.
Okay, thank you very much, Hanisham, for that interesting presentation. If people have any questions, please type them in the chat and we can get to them after the last talk. But I'd like to move on to this last talk for today.
I'll try
yeah,
to
so if you
unshare,
could
please.
stop
Yeah,
the screen sharing, it'd be good.
All right. Right. Sorry, just a second. Okay. How am I
Yeah, if you
going to
press stop
unshare?
share, that should do it.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
There we
Sorry.
go. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll be hearing from Rusaslina Idris from University Malaya, talking about, well, the talk is titled Like Cucumber to Durian, Indigenous Land Rights, Environmental Justice, and the Criminalization of Land Protection in Malaysia. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivek and the organizers. I'll go straight to my talk and hope I'll get through in 15 minutes. So the title of my talk, Like Cucumber to Durian, is actually from a metaphor or maybe a simile, on proverb, I think, of a Malay proverb that says, in Malay it says, Pagai mentimun dengan durian. And this is something that I've heard some of my Orang Asli friends describe their situation vis-a-vis the more powerful state or more powerful developers. And this metaphor takes on a new meaning or a more significant meaning when actually the developers in this particular case are durian plantation owners. So the Tamia, I'll be focusing on the Tamia Orang Asli who live in the highlands of Formosa. And the Tamia have lived in a reciprocal relationship with the forests, animals, and other sentient beings in the landscape since time immemorial. The forest is an integral part of their life and identity. They hunt, forage, cultivate swidden fields and trees, and perform sacred rituals in this landscape. Their relationship with humans and more than humans are guided by ethical and moral rules. There are many prohibitions and taboos related to trees, animals, rivers, mountains, and other earth and spirit beings. Transgressions results in retribution in the form of perhaps sickness or climate calamity. For example, I'm told making fun of animals in a disrespectful manner can cause flooding. Disturbing a mountain, such as destroying the forest, will cause Tata Engku, the mountain spirit, to be angry, bringing down strong wind, thunder, and lightning. Recent human and tiger conflicts has been attributed to were tigers that were angry with the peace pact made with humans had been violated as their resting place in the mountains were locked over. So the Tamia are very careful with their dealings with the many forms of earth beings and spirits, taking care to behave properly and performing different forms of rituals to appease and maintain relations with the more than humans. Of course, Dr. Jeffrey Benjamin has written much about this, and if you're interested, definitely look up his book on Tamia religions. So the Tamia of Gua Musang has, for many years, been living under threats of many different forms of land intrusion, mining, logging, and more recently, the Ladang Musang King, or the mega durian plantation. So actually this research is part of a larger FRGS grant project with Professor Gugit Ching from Nottingham University, Malaysia, looking at the impact of durian economy. So I'm focusing specifically on the Orang Asli. So the impact of the deforestation is varied, and as you can imagine, it affects the way of living for the community. So this large-scale durian plantation is a new threat to the area. And this is sort of, previously it was oil palm, mega oil palm plantation, and now durian plantation is being set up at large scale. So I think historically, previously durian orchards were, small, were owned by families, and they were small holdings. And now we see this phenomena of large scale durian plantation. I won't go so much into the details of this, but it's something that we're studying in terms of sort of the mechanism and things like crowdfunding. You can invest and pay 5,000 ringgit to get a tree, and you can monitor the tree via all this technology as well. So it's like a different kind of plantation. So part of this boom is from the China's demand for Musang King durian variety. For those in Malaysia who are who love durian, it costs quite a lot of money to buy durian Musang King. And in China, there's a lot of a huge demand as well. And then with the opening of Musang King export, that has created a boom in this business. And statistics data that show that Musang King durian generate 9 times as much revenue as oil palm per hectare. So in this paper, I'm sort of looking at this contest over resources, and it's not just land that is the contested resource. Of course, land is what we're focusing on, but here I'm sort of drawing on the work of Pasternak, who suggests that we understand legality as a resource. So here, to quote her work, the underlying assumption of settler state legality shape all the mechanisms through which continuing dispossession and land alienation happens. When indigenous peoples put their bodies on the land in every way to contest these incursions, they force an encounter between indigenous and colonial laws. And also to quote Victoria Tauli-Corpus, who's the UN Special Rapporteur for Indigenous People, those who defend land and human rights are declared terrorists, thugs, or criminals for defending their rights, or for simply living on land coveted by others. And often what begins with smear campaigns, labeling defenders anti-development, leads to legal prosecutions and arrests. And this is exactly what we see have been happening in Gomasang in the last, last 10 years or so. So in Kelantan, customary land for orang Asli are not acknowledged, as illustrated by this quote by the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources presently, and who's also a Kelantan MP. So, and as usual, when orang Asli protests, it's often said that they're instigated by others, right, backed by NGOs, and it's sort of it's not really their own volition, but like they've been instigated by outsiders. So what we have seen is that indigenous people, the Timya community, have been defending their customary land in many different ways. Of course, they've been writing and sending memos and things like that, but they've also been most visibly defending their customary land through setting up these blockades, right? Physically being in the path of the loggers or the developers. And this has been happening for many years. And some of the larger blockades were in 2016, 2018, and there have been arrests and violence, altercation. For those who are interested, you can look at videos where people with chainsaws come in and cut down the blockades. Very violent kind of images during these altercations. There's also a use of symbolism, flags. You can see in this picture the use of the Malaysian flag, the Kelantan flag. There's a video that's circulating as the FRU or the state agents were coming forward, towards the protester. They started singing Negaraku. So these use of symbolisms are also important in being able to get their message across of their rights as citizens of the country. So on the state side, what we see is, as I mentioned before, is the criminalization of land protection. So again, when we think about how is the collision of state laws and indigenous laws, where the Tamia are being criminalized for protecting their land. So the response is to protest, to blame outsiders, And also there's a heavy use of government machineries to protect developers' interests. So you see here, this is a photo from 2018. Truckloads of government agents were brought in, including FRU unit, sort of the coming in to intimidate the protesters or people who are standing at blockades. So aside from, so I've been interested in looking at the kinds of alliance making as a strategy for the TEMIA. And aside from support from IP rights groups such as COAC and legal organization like Bar Council Committee, who's helping them with documentation and also mapping and setting up court cases, the TEMIA have also created alliances with several other groups. And partly this, the images of these blockades actually caught the attention of some of these groups, including members of the public. So there's been alliances with environmental groups, local environmental groups such as PECA, Klima and Kami, human rights group, Suaram, Amnesty International, journalists and artists and youth groups. As I mentioned before, this is made possible via social media, right? So these are some pictures of some of these collaboration and alliances and support from the different groups. So what's interesting in this sort of looking at the strategies, both the state and the TEMIA, is that while the authorities are, trying to provincialize the conflict, it's not really an issue. It's really, instigators, NGO instigators. The TEMIA instead try to convey a more global message. So they are talking about the loss of the lungs of the earth and about the climate crisis. So this reaches out to sort of a larger constituency of people in sort of creating solidarity and alliance making. So in the different work, I look at this what I call this translation work, where given their relationship to the land and to the earth beings in the forest, they have to try and translate it in a way that others can understand. So maybe talking about where tigers might not relate to other people, but talking about climate change and climate crisis, create a common language and common concern. This is not to say that they're mimicking these different languages, but they're actually translating their own concepts and concerns in a way that a larger group of people can understand. So these are some of the examples earlier. And also some of the members of the public also have provided support to sending goods and food. And when people set up blockades, they're actually living their livelihood for weeks and months. And so this kinds of support is needed. Documentation tools and kits also was sent in. And also here we see some of the journalists and artists who also showed their alliance by creating these artworks. Youth groups such as this is Swaram groups who did the street theater to get people to be aware of the issues that's facing the TEMIA in Gua Musang. And also some of these alliances have also helped the TEMIA take their voice to another level. And here from their association with one of the environmental groups, PECA, they were able to go to Putrajaya and had an audience with Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad 2.0 at that time. And that was sort of an important moment for them to have this meeting. And it had some implication in that the federal government then decided that they would support the TEMIA and sue the Kelantan government for not protecting the Orang Asli's rights. But of course, we had a government change in 2020, and in 2021, that just didn't quite work out. I mean, the reason that the federal government, of course, took sides was the Kelantan government was at that time not part of the coalition. In 2020, they became part of the coalition. And in 2021, the Court of Appeal decided that the federal government has no local standby over this. But at this, where it's at now is that the Tamia themselves are mounting a case to the government. So another recent issue that has come up is this the Empangan Negeri, a mega dam that is also threatening the area. So it's like a series of different, battles that they have to constantly be voicing, their protests and trying to make people understand why it's important that to protect their customary rights. So this is seem to be impending soon. So to conclude this paper, what I've tried to do is sort of think about, what happens when there's the collision of different interpretations of legality. So you have the contest over resources, which is not just the forest, but also legality. So who has the rights here? Indigenous peoples also have their own laws, and then the state law is imposed upon this indigenous law way of being with the world, and so you have this collision. So in thinking about legality as a resource, how do we access this resource? And here we see the Tamia's strategy in creating alliances and building solidarity. So while the state is provincializing this issue, the Tamia takes the opposite approach, building solidarity and creating alliances and taking their story to the national, international audience, articulating their concerns in the global language of environmental justice and climate change. I'd like to say, I don't want to romanticize this idea of resistance, because at the end of it, again, the symbolism of the Timun and the Durian, that there is a very vast unequal power relationship, but we can sort of think about how then can we sort of push or push back against this or unequal power relations. So thank you very much. That's the end of my talk.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, I think that's a great place to end, because it, I think, really encapsulated the challenges facing Orang Asli groups and what many of them are doing about it. So as we conclude, we'll stay on another few minutes here. I want to open the floor to any questions. People can feel free to raise their hands to ask any of the presenters questions or to raise new issues. Or you can also type in the chat here. So as our audience members think about that, maybe I'll just ask one question going back to Aya's talk that prompted some discussion about demographics. This is a really important topic to try to understand how these populations are changing through time. And our group is also very interested in demographics and getting good numbers on these things. There was a comment from Yogus in here, so maybe Yogus or perhaps Colin will have some information about this. Official Jackua numbers versus what we get in scientific or anthropological publications. What is the best source of Orang Asli demographic data for researchers and activists to be using? Let's see, Colin raised hand. I think I can enable you to talk. Okay, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, according to Jackua, in 2020, the official population of the Orang Asli was 210,811. That has been modified to 213 around there now. But then you must always remember that the figures that you get are only for the 853 villages which the government recognizes as Orang Asli villages. They don't include the 126 Kampung Tambahan or Sepihan, which even Jackua recognizes, although we know that there are at least about 300 to 400 of such kampungs. So you have to be very careful with figures, no? Official figures, registered figures, and what do you call it, the census figures. That's all, thanks.
Okay, yeah, great point. Thanks for that, Colin. Aya, do you have any comment or thought on that as we move forward?
Thanks for the information, because I was very had very troubled, because the number from the Jaguar's data and the number from the statistics department are really different. So I was wondering which one I should refer to. But now I know little about it.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Yeah. Maybe those of us who are interested in this topic can be in touch about that. There is one general question here that I think speaks to the topics from a few speakers. Vivian asks, is there any possibility of reforming the law that empowers the state government over land? I'll kind of just open this up to any of the speakers or audience members. Feel free to raise your hand. Going once, going twice. Okay, Colin raised hand again. Thanks,
Yeah,
Colin.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there any possibility of reforming the law that empowers the state government over land? Actually, land is a state matter. State governments have total control over land. That is why that is the excuse they give legally when they say that they do not want to give land for the Orang Asli, as in Orang Asli land reserves, because land is a state matter and the Orang Asli is a federal matter. No state government will want to give land to the federal government, especially if an opposition state. So the way out for state governments is to create Orang Asli reserves under the National Land Code, not Section 6, no? Instead of under the Aboriginal Peoples Act. So yes, land is a state matter. The state governments have powers over land, and that's where the main issue is most of the time.
Okay, we have two participants raising hands here. Yogis, you are now able to talk, I think.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Just to add on to what Colin said, that's a very practical answer. I'll give you a more theoretical answer. I think there is no legal impediment for the federal government to intervene and actually acquire land to, acquire land for the purpose of reservation or alienation to the Orang Asli. So there are constitutional powers for the federal government to intervene as well. And the federal government can also intervene through the National Land Council, under the federal constitution. Now, the problem is the federal government really does not, I don't think they have the will, or I don't think they will want to interfere with the state, because the state powers, because it's always land is always regarded as part of, is under the exclusive purview of the state, but they do have the power to actually intervene. Whether they get the support of the state government or political support is, of course, a different matter. Thanks.
Thanks, Yogis. Colin, I see your hand up. I don't know if that was from earlier or.
Yeah. It's a very quick addition to what Roger said. That is very, very correct. The state, federal government has the power if it wants to alienate land for Orang Asli, because FELDA, as you know, is a federal agency, just like JAQUA is a federal agency, and the federal government has been able to direct states to create huge areas of FELDA reservations. No, so if they can do it for FELDA, why can't they do it for JAQUA, no, or the Orang Asli?
Okay, thank you both for those clarifications. I'll raise one more issue unless there's anything else. I see a comment in the chat about Orang Asli being reluctant to go to the hospital due to chance they might be warded. They prefer to go to clinics just to get medicines, but to recuperate at home. This might be a problem regarding issues with childcare, who would look after the kids. does anyone have any perspectives on this? Any personal experiences? I know this is a major challenge. Is actually getting people to hospitals, getting them comfortable enough and such to actually stay there. Kirk Endicott noted here that in the 1970s, people were reluctant to go to the hospital because they felt isolated, and they noticed that patients and families sometimes actually caught diseases there, as well as the fact that traditional treatments sometimes require isolation in the home community. Kirk, not to put you on the spot, would you maybe like to say something? If you're willing, it'd be good to hear your voice. Okay, I guess Kirk maybe isn't here anymore.
Mute. Can you hear
Oh, there
me?
you are. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my evidence is very old, and so I just, as background, thought that in some ways there's been more acceptance of medicine, modern medicine, and in extreme cases, people will take family members to the hospital rather than see them die. This was, but my observations really end at the end of the 90s. So in some ways, they're just background.
Yeah, thanks for that. Nevertheless, very, very useful, and we've experienced similar things. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yeah,
I often used to go to hospital with other friends, and the problem is I always felt like if I need to stay with them in the hospital, but there is no place to sleep, so I needed to sleep on the floor when I took them to the hospital. So they prefer to go to the hospital combat because there is a place for the families.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So if there are any, facilities for the families in the hospital or near the hospital, it would be better for Asli, I think.
Yeah. I see that Dr. Zandis is here. I think he would be well equipped to give some perspective on this. Not to put you on the spot, Dr. Zandis, but do you have any comments on this issue? Okay, maybe he's not here. But Rusaslina says there's also the high cost of transport to the nearest health facility, and the condition of the transit center is not comfortable. Yes, indeed, these are all kind of barriers here. All right, well, I think we're wrapping up here. I'd like to thank everyone again for your participation. We had great talks, I think 16 in total over the past 2 weeks. We do intend to keep this going every year or every 2 years. So do look out for notices about that. We will be posting these videos on YouTube. So this will be posted later today, and last week's has already been posted. This is on my personal YouTube page. So feel free to share that. And with that, we'll conclude. Thank you again, everyone. Take care and hope to see you all again soon. Okay, thanks, Rodney. So we can go ahead and stop the recording now.